What's up, Dallas aka Inferness, and most of us, if not all of us, only use YouTube from the perspective of watching videos and don't really consider what it may be like to have a job where your only task is just to watch the most suspect ones. YouTube staff and/or review members. They're only forced to just sit and review the most reported and worst and probably even most disturbing videos that get uploaded every minute, every day. Let's just say I'm not handing in my application for that anytime soon. But what you should do is go on a little adventure about 2 inches below this screen, and if you did it right, you should see a button. It's kind of hard to miss. If it's red, all you need to do to get free good luck is to just turn that gray. It's that easy. But seriously, we all bully the YouTube staff and review members, and we don't really ever actually consider the type of stuff that they come across and have to deal with. Just let it sink in that something like 500 hours of stuff, video stuff, is put on this website every minute. Someone out there has to review it when it takes a turn for the not so family friendly. But what about when it gets even worse than that? Well, that's what we're covering today. This is how one report put a YouTube employee's life at risk. So take a break from roasting the guy who chose to give you yellow dollar sign for the 169th or something time for just 1 minute and immerse yourself into a different perspective. This story comes from a man named Thorbjorn. I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do. I know I can't say that right, but it's literally their name, and... Wait a minute. Is there something you need to tell me? We're gonna go with Thorb for short for this story. Thorb was an immigrant to America who recently got a job as a Google employee, and no one really knew their actual name. He always just went by his name Thorb, even on paper, for various reasons. Can't relate. Whenever someone asks me my name, they never look at me weird when I say Dallas aka Inferness. I mean, they do, but you get the point. One of the biggest hurdles in adapting to the new country that they lived in was the differences in social norms. Let's just say that this experience probably didn't help out with that. Most of his friends were still back in his home country, and they all had IT-related jobs too. And eventually he was transferred from the more Google side of the workforce to YouTube, since at that moment there was a very high lack of employees to review things. I guess because of the multiple waves of the adpocalypses that were going rampant, just making all of them either quit or move their job somewhere else. Frick, someone actually thought YouTube Heroes was a good idea, so that should tell you just about how bad it was. And by the account of Thorb, this basically is how the normal day would go down as a YouTube employee. Number 1, wake up. Number 2, take a bite of Nutella on toast. And number 3, watch flagged and reviewed videos for 12 hours. Now, at least you didn't have to go anywhere. Oh wait, yeah, he did. He had to commute over an hour a day just to get to the offices where he'd do his job. I almost forgot that there was a time in history before 2020. But seriously, YouTube, virus or no virus, you're really gonna be making people drive an hour just to sit in an office all day long just to watch videos as their only job? Essentially, everyone has this list of videos that they were tasked on going through for that particular day. And they basically have hundreds of these claims to go through and look over all the guidelines to essentially know whether to press the guilty or innocent button. So there's essentially a time limit on each one of these to get these done by the end. He's pretty much playing YouTube Kahoot with flagged and reported videos. That doesn't seem too bad to get paid for. And from my perspective as a level 100 YouTube hero, I feel your pain. It's not always easy saving this city. And most of the time, Thorb would see videos that were just reported for seemingly no reason. So it came down to him saying that only about 1 out of every 10 of the videos ended up needing to be investigated further. So not many. So don't think you just got ghosted whenever you report a video and nothing happens. This stuff gets looked at. Every single one. So yeah, it's just you. Now, every now and then, a single report would actually open up a forum discussion about the video or particular problem the user was facing, and lots of these ended up in the YouTube help forums and got locked and archived once the issue was resolved. This time around, the situation got elevated to a whole different level. This day, in particular, Thorb's office pal or friend who worked nearby was leaving early, so he decided to ask Thorb, you know what, I still have a lot of these things left on my list, or I still have a couple of them, and if you finish them off for me today, then next Monday I'll come back and do half of all your work in exchange. So it was like an old switcheroo that they would do every now and then. So Thorb is like, alright, it's all good, I got all my stuff done, and it's perfectly fine, I can spend a couple more minutes here. It's Friday afternoon, basically. So now Thorb is on a whole different account logged into his colleague's account, working in his specific cubicle, and there's a few dozen videos to go through. Basically, if you didn't complete the total amount of videos in the list for that specific day, it wasn't like you just get instantly executed. You just have like a demerit system. Kind of like a strike system. Well, that's surprising. And after 3, you're out. Nonetheless, Thorb is getting these last few done, and it's all great until he has that one that leads to a discussion board post. The post was about an apparent channel called Hell's Gate. And that may sound familiar to recurring viewers of this series. The reporter's name was Brandon, and Brandon essentially reported the entire channel, all the videos on it. And to cut it short, because we made an entire documentary on this, all the videos on the channel were very weird, disturbing, and basically completely illegal. There wasn't a need to look at any of the guidelines to make sure of it. Thorb straight out had the power to delete it. There were reported videos with footage of dead animals being sacrificed in some homemade cult type of arrangement. And the whole story behind the reported Hell's Gate even goes deep into history with the area they were around. So he's basically like, yeah, I'm taking that bull honky down. If it were me, to be honest, I would just say, you know what? I'm out. Sorry, Jarl from The Office, but this ain't worth it. You're just gonna have to take the L. But of course, Thorb didn't do that. And yes, Jarl is the name that we're gonna be going by with this person number 2, because Thorb was unable to reach out to them for permission on using their personal name. So he cleared up the whole issue afterwards, obviously disgusted with what he had to see, personally recounting it back to me that he never had even imagined that the type of stuff that he saw would have even been allowed in any movie, let alone on YouTube. And this guy's from Norway.
So to a Norwegian, PG-13 is actually PG-9.
Metric system. Thorb was in a slightly long conversation with Brandon about the issue after it was settled, and he was like, yeah, these people are real and they've been around where I live all the time, and somehow they actually just got on YouTube now. And after this, they simply closed the conversation, archived it on the forum, and went their separate ways. And this was pretty much the end of the day for Thorb, so he packed up all of his stuff and went home. Now this actually turned out to be a holiday weekend, so there was 3 weekend days, and this is a really important detail. So on Tuesday, things immediately start off on the entire wrong foot. He checks into work after driving there and starts his normal day, probably still with the Nutella. He didn't even notice until later on that his office buddy just wasn't even there all day long. So it was a little bit annoying considering that he remembered how half of his work was owed to him by him on that day. And the next day, he still isn't there. So now he says, you know what? I'm gonna call him because this dude owes me. He goes to the staff page to look up the contact info for his colleague, Jarl, and he can't find them anywhere on the whole list of employees in that building. He had to ask another worker for his number just to get a hold of him, preparing to be mad about not paying his end of the deal. Jarl is the one who's mad and just going nuts over the phone. He's basically yelling repeatedly, what the F do you want? What's your problem? You got me effing fired. So Thorb is like, what? It turned out that somehow, right after Thorb left on that Friday, Jarl's account that he was using started deleting all of the messages on the whole website and basically wiped the hard drive off of the computer. So of course, Jarl was suspected of doing it, and clearly Thorb didn't. So that was obviously a major red flag. If Jarl's account was hacked, you would have expected the boss or whatever to have found out about it. So he was about to explain to the supervisor about the situation, but unfortunately, he was too nervous that him revealing the fact that they were doing this switcheroo thing, which wasn't even allowed to begin with, would have risked his job, and he couldn't lose his job because he had no other opportunities, so he just decided not to. And that was basically that. He had to do the rest of the week's work all alone, and now without even anyone else in his corner of the office. One of the days of that week, he got a call from a random number, so he stepped outside to answer it, and it turned out to be Jarl. And he said that his house was broken into and robbed, and that he thought that Thorb had something to do with it because on one of the walls was spray painted Jarl's account username as his YouTube employee account. Obviously, Thorb explained to him how he didn't have anything to do with it, and also how everything else happened, and even offered Jarl to stay in his apartment temporarily. And Jarl wasn't still believing Thorb 100% at this point, but either way he accepted it. So now basically this guy Jarl is just jobless and homeless and moves in with Thorb. And Thorb would ask him what the heck even happened with the job and all that, with the house, and Jarl would just say it's completely unexplainable. Jarl had of course moved all of his personal items and computer into the apartment as well, so it wasn't looking so good for Thorb's personal space, considering that it was only like a total of 500 square feet. And after this, things started immediately going south faster than my social life. Late at night, or actually in the middle of the morning, there would be this incessant knocking on the front door of the apartment. This knocking that just wouldn't stop at like 3 in the morning. And it was super loud, and it was just this pounding at the door. And since Thorb at this point is sleeping in the living room, he's like, alright, I'm gonna check out who this is. But Jarl would stop him and say that he wasn't going to take any chances of this, especially after what had just happened. And then they would hear these footsteps going up the fire escape straight outside their window and then stopping right at their level, and then just having there be no sound after that for minutes on end. So Jarl says, you know what, I'm calling the cops, but the cops say there's nothing they can do because there's no direct evidence of any crime being broken yet. What they probably meant to say was, you're only allowed to have one horrible crime happen to you at a time, so we're just gonna let this one slide. Looks like something terrible might be happening to this guy. Let's just wait it out and see what happens. Throughout this time, Jarl keeps getting these constant pop-ups whenever someone is trying to sign into your Apple ID, but it's always just some different location at a time. So he goes through all of his accounts and computer files looking for some kind of virus or hack, but there's just nothing at all. So now Thorb is getting uncomfortable because he doesn't want to get in some kind of jackpot or something. Like what the heck? I don't want to be involved in this. This is freaking freaky. Of course, Jarl's out of the job. Thorb still works every single day. And one day after a late night working at YouTube, he gets a call right before he's about to go back home from Jarl saying that the apartment was broken into. And Thorb rushed to get there, and still takes him an hour, but he got there this time, and the police actually showed up, obviously. All of Jarl's computer equipment was gone, and Thorb's laptop was gone. But there was a piggy bank of over $1,000, like a literal piggy bank, that's what he said, it's an actual piggy bank, left behind, untouched. That's a brilliant idea, because you probably wouldn't expect that much money to be in a piggy bank. Put like a gold bar in there, and it's the safest place. Police say there's an ongoing investigation, and they're figuring this whole thing out. So they basically say, okay, what you guys should do now is come with us to the station, we'll have you fill out a statement, give us more information, and we'll give you a temporary place to stay again. So both Thorb and Jarl are now being driven in a cop car to the station. This is not how he expected to spend his weekend. So when they're there, they start going over all the basic things, taking their statements because Jarl still wanted to prove that he didn't do anything that he got fired for to get his job back. And they both give the cops their ID, and that's that. And they're sitting at the station waiting for them to come back with the information, just clearing their heads about everything that happened. But when the cops do come back, they don't look too friendly anymore. They announce Jarl's full real name, and basically tell him that he's under arrest for fraudulent and illegal online activity. So Thorb just watches as his friend/office buddy is taken away in handcuffs after they read him his rights. At this point, I would just be asking myself, is this just a simulation or something, because God is clearly pranking me? Where's the camera, bro? And the cops after this tell Thorb that basically they still have a temporary motel for him to go to, while they're cleaning up the apartment, and they have the investigation completed in that time. So, there's really no other choice for Thorb. So after staying at the motel for the entire weekend, Thorpe's apartment is finally cleaned up and put back to normal, so he's able to move back in. No word on whatever happened to Jarl after that. He can't call him, obviously, because for as far as he knows, he's in jail. He doesn't answer his main phone. But his regular life goes back to schedule as he yet again goes back to work. An entire month goes by, no contact from Jarl. He had a whole new office partner take his place at that point. But this all leads up to what would eventually be the final day that Thorpe would work for YouTube. It was the very end of the day, pretty much in the dead of night. So no one else was even in the office, essentially, not just in his section of it. He finishes his tasks and decides to pack up right after. Leaving the building, he immediately sees something wrong with his car. It's a used car from the 1990s, so it's not like it looked that good anyways, but even from the distance, he could see the tires were all deflated. And when Thorpe got to it, he saw that they were slashed. So he had to call a tow truck and essentially also call an Uber just to get back to his apartment. And this was literally in the middle of the parking lot of the YouTube building itself. So the Uber driver takes him an hour all the way back to his apartment, and that's just one really pricey Uber trip. That's honestly super not fair. And the price of the tow truck expenses. It's not looking good for him, but he gets to the apartment, and once he's walking into the building, approaching his door, he sees that it's actually left wide open from the hallway. But the first thought that he had was, maybe Jarl came back. But he knows that he always leaves the light on because he gets back home late every single day, so he doesn't have to fumble for the light switch and be in the dark every time he goes in. All the lights were off. So he basically just says, nah, not doing that. Calls the cops from the outside of the building. Cops come, and this time they're there in like 5 minutes. So they're not playing around this time. They go in and almost instantly find this raggedy, unusual looking person inside. And they take them outside, arrested in handcuffs. And this person was just dressed in all black, and they had a knife in their apartment. It wasn't hard to detain the person because they just gave up instantly. I guess they were expecting not a bunch of police to go running through the door and just this random guy, YouTube employee. But it was believed that this was the person who also robbed Jarl's house before, but for whatever reason it just couldn't be proven conclusively. Oh, we don't know, it's a tough one. So Jarl ended up being released because he was never actually put in prison, but mainly jail until they figured out what was going on, and not sure if he got any kind of settlement for having to deal with that. But he got out of there, and Thorpe and Jarl remained in contact, but Thorpe decided to resign from YouTube at that point because clearly, if it only took like a day to get to the point where you're basically being killed by someone online, I'd probably do the same thing too. And Thorpe managed to still be in contact with the original reporter of this situation, Brandon, which is, long story short, how this whole thing ended up getting here. So that's basically that. And this also happened in Cleveland, Ohio. Is this a normal thing that's there? Is this just what happens? This is what's good when you're in Cleveland, you just get... This story was just a little bit... I didn't even know what to expect after a certain point. I honestly wouldn't have even been surprised if Anton Chigurh just burst into the motel room out of nowhere.
I don't know.
I don't really have the actual information on who the person who was arrested was, because like I said, after that, it just became like private information that apparently Thorpe didn't even have access to. And I don't even know the name of the person, so I can't even look up like the police reports if they went to jail, if they were somehow connected to Hell's Gate cult. Clearly, they were pissed off and they somehow had hacking abilities because they deleted their channel. But either way, that's this story for YouTube Unsolved. And by the way, speaking about YouTube Unsolved, I am now selling YouTube Unsolved themed adult diapers in the merch section. You should definitely check that out. It's definitely a hot topic. Thanks for watching this video, and if you're ever going to be a YouTube employee in your life, just be careful about it. And don't be from Norway if you're gonna do that. It's just a safe measure. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.